Hello and welcome. We are creating this recording for you because we ran a webinar yesterday and unfortunately the recording of that webinar was corrupted. So we're going to go through it again and hopefully cover off all the points that we talked about yesterday, and you'll find this useful as you come to your graduation planning this season. So the reason we're here is we're here to talk about leveraging student content in your ceremonies to create great engagement. And the pandemic taught us some lessons, and we're noticing as a result of that there's three key trends that are emerging as our clients are moving back into the in-person ceremony environment. The first is the spotlight is very much on the graduates. So the pandemic taught us that with virtual ceremonies, it had to be about the graduate and giving them the very best experience that you possibly could given the circumstances. And what's happened now is that as we come back into the in-person event, there's been a change of emphasis, and it used to be much more actually on honorary graduates, speeches, the good and the great of the institutions, which of course are still very important and form a part of your ceremony. But there's a realization now that actually a bit more individualization and personalization on the graduates themselves, rather than a few seconds across a stage, is where engagement is increased for the audience, and therefore it puts your institution on the map and makes your event a better event. And those graduates, we're finding as well, want to be active contributors to their ceremonies rather than passive followers. And so those are two key intertwined themes. And then lastly, again, it's come out of the pandemic, and it kind of makes a lot of sense. And there was a trend going this way anyway beforehand, is that you've got to make your in-person event an event essentially for TV as well. We're all living on screen just as we are now. So it's about creating something that lives on in the digital environment and can be shared for those people that aren't actually in the physical space. So we always talk about the Super Bowl as being the pinnacle of that type of thing. You know, there's 100,000 people in the stadium to watch the Super Bowl, but there's a billion watching it on TV. So it's an in-person live event made for a TV audience, and that's very similar with what we've got to do with graduation and commencement ceremonies now. So I'm very pleased to be here today. My name is Rupert Forsyth. I'm the founder of StageClip. I've spent 25 years working with alumni relations, marketing and event teams at universities around the globe. And I've got with me today Dr. Keith Warburg, who's our Chief Marketing Officer. We're very blessed to have him on our team because Keith comes from inside institutions. His last role was at Florida State University, so he understands marketing, communications and alumni relations and their link into the graduation and commencement sector very, very well indeed. So welcome, Keith, and welcome to you all. Thank you very much.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you, Rupert, for that introduction. I am excited to be here today to understand how we can share what we've been learning from working with over 1,500 institutions over the last 3 years through a pandemic, through going to in-person graduations, back to virtual graduations, to not knowing what we were going to do. And now it seems everyone's pretty solidly going back to in-person or some sort of hybrid graduation. We've learned a lot through this process. We're excited to share that to you today. I do like to just kind of offer up at the beginning of these talks a little bit of why you should listen to what we have to say, to make sure that we're a proper authority to listen to. And so again, we have worked with over 1,500 institutions in Europe, the UK, Canada, and the United States. We have provided over 1.5 million graduate clips to engage those new graduates across that period and across that landscape. And across 2021 and 2020, we were the #1 provider of virtual graduations worldwide. And so we have been doing this. We've been doing it at scale. We're very excited to present what we've learned. So why don't we jump right into it? So Rupert, the #1 tool that I think we want to share today is that you really have to return to your in-person ceremonies well. You can't just go back to how things were before. We've heard from numerous schools and from graduates themselves that back to normal just isn't going to cut it. And so really we need to find ways to personalize and individualize the experience and take what we've learned from virtual ceremonies and apply that in-house in those in-person ceremonies. And so you've got some great ideas for how we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it all boils down to one thing. If you've got great content, and the great content is about the people that are in your ceremonies, and you can collect that content, manage that content, repackage that content to work for you in different ways throughout your ceremony cycle, then you're in a really good place. And you won't be surprised to know that that's one of the things that StageClip does, and part of our platform does, and we'll show you a little bit about that as we go. So what we're about to show you and talk to you about is that it can be done in lots of different ways, and the StageClip platform is one of those ways. But the great thing is with this content is that you can use it before your event to throw forward to your event from marketing perspective. You can use it during your event. So when people are sitting in the audience waiting for something to happen, you can be playing some student content and spotlighting certain graduates on the big screen while they're waiting. At the same time, your live stream audience can be watching the same stuff rather than an empty room filling up with people before they sit down for the start of the show. And then, of course, afterwards, you can use that same event, so that same content with your in-event, your actual event footage, and package that up for your marketing purposes, PR purposes, and so on. So it extends the life of your event. And crucially, this is the #1 PR opportunity for an institution in the calendar, and you've got all this wonderful content to then springboard and start to drive the pipe for your future student recruitment.
Yeah, I think one of the great things about this is that you have a captive audience, both in the ceremony, in the building, as well as online. So why not give them content to keep them engaged while they're waiting in line for photos or for gowns, or while they're waiting for everyone to kind of shuffle in and get their seats on the webcast. So having that content, I think, is key for increasing engagement during your ceremonies. Another way to do that is by personalizing the experience with slides. So bringing a slide in and putting it up on the screen is a great way to incorporate graduate content. It's a great way to do it in a branded and consistent manner so that all of your student submissions, whether those are photos, messages, videos, or more, all have the same look and feel, all feel like they fit together for the institution, and you've had an opportunity to moderate those and review them. So I think that's one of the most kind of easy to enact tips that we can share today.
Yeah, that's a great win, an easy win, and certainly personalizes the experience. And so for our audience from the UK and Ireland particularly, where this isn't such a big thing, what happens is as the graduate walks up on stage, then their personal information, their slide, excuse me, is shown on screen as they walk across. So again, that gives them more attention, more spotlight, and gives the audience a greater thrill when they see their loved one cross the stage. Now the question becomes, well, how does that work? Crumbs, what's the operational technicalities around it? Well, there's a number of ways you can do it. The first is you can collect this type of content yourself, give it to an AV team, that someone who's producing the AV side of your show can press a button every time a graduate comes on stage. Now that means that you have to have a very rigorous walking order. So if someone doesn't turn up, goes out of turn or something like that, it can catch you off guard. And so that's why we would recommend using a scanning bit of software, something that we have to provide as well, where the students are given a card as they approach the stage. An assistant at the side of the stage scans the barcode, and then the slide pops up. And so that means that you always have the right content for the right person, and crucially at the right time. So the pace of the ceremony and the pace of displaying the content works with the pace of the ceremony.
So our next tip is really, I think this is key because this is something I struggled with in my ceremony, and I know graduates around the world deal with this all of the time, and that's getting your name pronounced correctly. I have a very German last name, and I had the joy of having our one German professor at my undergraduate ceremony read my name card out, and so it was very not how my name is typically pronounced. And that, even though it was a fantastic ceremony, an eagle flew down from the top of the football field, and family was there, and all of these things. One of the things I still remember 10 years later is that my name was not pronounced correctly. So Rupert, how can we help students with that experience?
Well, you're absolutely right, Keith, and it's I have spent 25 years at graduation ceremonies, and you can put on the very best experience. You can have champagne receptions and excellent speakers and a wonderful setting and all those things. But if you mispronounce a name or spell it incorrectly, it can totally ruin the day for a graduate and their families. And I have seen it happen time and time again. And so there's a number of ways that you can work on that to lessen the chances of that type of thing happening. One of the ways is to get students to email back the phonetic pronunciation of how their name is spelt when you're contacting them regarding ticketing and so on. I've also known people to set up telephone recording systems where the graduate can ring in and leave their name and message. All these things are quite hard to manage and administer, and so at StageClip we have a program where we use automated name reading so that a graduate can listen beforehand to how their name will be pronounced, and if it's incorrect they can change it, and then it means that your readers can listen beforehand how names should be pronounced. So Steve Smith, probably a pretty easy one. Name reader wouldn't need to come in and have a look at that. But then there may be some names from different parts of the world, for example, that are pronounced in a certain way, and it means your name readers can come in and look at that. And Keith, I don't know if we're able to flick from this to my screen, and I can just quickly show folks what what does that look like in reality. It's quite hard to imagine this process, so I'll just show what it looks like from the user point of view. Here we are. There's a fresh one. So a student gets to a page like this where they're then encouraged to upload their certain information, and here, as you can see, they can play their name. So at this point, the student hears their name. I don't know if you could hear that. If the student is happy that the name is the way they want it to be pronounced, then everything's good. If they wanted to have it changed to be something, so let's say Butler was Bootler instead, then they might be able to type something in like Bootler. Again, okay, and say, right, I'm happy with that. Click save, and then on the client side, which screen, here we go, all Nathan's information appears here, and then you're able to listen to it, and then your readers can say, right, that's how I'm going to pronounce it when I read it live. There's some other options as well with name recording, which I won't go into too much detail on here now, but hopefully that gives you a snapshot of how that one works.
So our next step that we're going to share with you guys is really, I think, the key for the entire ceremony, and that is commemorating that big moment. I can remember after my ceremony, especially my graduate program, when I finished my doctoral degree, I had all of my family there. It was an exciting moment, and it all went by so fast that as I'm standing there surrounded by everyone with flowers and teddy bears and confetti coming from the ceiling, I just thought, how am I going to remember that exact moment? A photo can do that for me, but really, I wish I had a way to kind of capture the emotions that I was feeling in that moment.
Yeah, and I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. And in fact, it's the reason we are who we are. It's our raison d'etre. We know that moment on stage is the culmination of usually a lifetime's education and work, and it's the culmination of a story for that individual, but also the culmination of a story for a family. So both you and I, Keith, are first generation graduates in our families, and it's a very, very big deal. It shows the progression of a family over time and history. And again, one of the things that I have seen when I have been at ceremonies, I've literally seen grandfather there with blackened hands where he's been working down a coal mine his whole life. And there he is watching his granddaughter get her degree in law. That's a significant moment for a family from where they were and where they're going and where they've been. And because each one of those clips represents a story, it means that you're creating bucket loads of content authentically, very cheaply, and crucially branded the way you want it to be branded. It's like the holy grail of marketing. So fantastic from an engagement and marketing point of view.
Absolutely. So let's talk about our next subject, which is engaging all of the graduates in your ceremonies whether they're there in person or not. I think this is something we learned during the pandemic, and I think this is one of our biggest learnings is that you have to be able to give every student, every graduate, the recognition they deserve for the accomplishment that they've achieved, even if they can't be there, whether that's due to a pandemic or now due to maybe employment that they've accepted and they've already moved away, or they're wanting to come back for a makeup ceremony, something like that. So, Rupert, I know this is something you're very passionate about as well.
Yeah, I've excuse me, I've always been very passionate about this, actually, making sure that everyone gets the recognition they deserved at the right time. And in the old pre-pandemic world, typically what would happen is that, that those graduates that didn't turn up to a ceremony, couldn't be there in person, were just part of an in absentia list, and they weren't given any acknowledgement. Now we know how important inclusivity is, and equability, and I think also just a sense of belonging. You want these people to be part of your family, your alumni family in the future. They've got to feel like they belonged all the way through, and of course this is another critical period in time for them. So one of the beauties of going through the pandemic was that we understand now how to recognize graduates who can't be there. And one of the ways is to take their content, their personal messages, the emotions and their personality, and involve it in an online capacity. But you can also do it in person. And I've seen a couple of really creative ways of doing this now. One of the ones I particularly liked was where the in-person ceremony happened. It came to the conclusion of the proceedings there, and then the announcer said, thank you very much, everyone. And now we're going to recognise our graduates who can't be with us in person today. And they played a stream of the virtual procession of student content. Every student was called out by name. Every student's name appeared on screen. And it was something that the audience at the in-person event could watch. And it meant that the online audience and those in absentia graduates were recognised as well. So really, really fantastic things that can be done there.
Absolutely. I think the next lesson is that you have to absolutely continue to live stream ceremonies. I think before the pandemic, many schools were not doing this. Many were either with their in-person or in-house teams, whether that was a student program or a department on campus, academic or staff. At least in the U.S., I know that's a big resource that we have. But during the pandemic, everyone had to shift because everyone had to be able to provide some sort of video of what was happening. And I think it's an absolute must to continue this. We haven't heard anyone yet say that they're going to stop streaming as part of this, even though they are going back to person.
Yeah, in fact, actually, what we're hearing, Keith, is that the live stream now is almost the lowest benchmark. It's then what do you do to enhance that experience?
Absolutely.
And that's where I think that creative teams, AV teams, if you're using a third-party vendor like First Sight Media, one of the country's top AV providers for graduation ceremonies, talk to them, because they've got some good ideas as well about how do you make it an event that that lives and sizzles dramatically for the online audience. So including stream specific content like we've said before. So for example, you don't just have people log onto a stream and they just see for 10 minutes people filtering into a room. They're watching something, so it's a spectacle, that kind of thing. Absolutely right.
Fantastic. Yes. So let's talk then about our next tip, which is embracing graduates as co-creators. You mentioned this as one of the top three, I think, lessons that we learned over the last few years. I know working in the U.S. for the Florida State University and the Alumni Association, and in previous roles, I saw this as a trend over really the last 10 years of this sort of transition from everyone wearing the same matching caps and gowns, crossing the stage in the same manner, everything being very sort of uniform and traditional, to really students starting to decorate their caps, starting to put on custom stoles for the different organizations that they were involved in, custom cords, all of those things. And now that's become a huge industry in the US at least. And while we initially maybe pushed back against that, we began to embrace it. And so now when you go to a commencement on this side of the pond, you see a sea of customized caps, and really what that teaches us is that the graduates want to be individually recognized, not only with their moment of crossing the stage, but they want to be able to express their personality in the experience. So they've put all of this work into it. They want to be able to do that. I think it's teaching us that new traditions can still bring in the same emotions. So there's not one way to recognize graduates. So we should remain flexible. If students want to express their personality, we should give them opportunities to do that in a way that also reinforces the reputation and the brand of the institution.
Yeah, and it's really interesting you should say that, Keith, because on this side of the pond, tradition is very, very important. And in fact, the tradition of caps and gowns and mortarboards, as they're called here, goes back to the 1600s. And that is, when we've surveyed graduates, actually, they want that. They want to be wearing caps and gowns and mortarboards, but they want the personality. And I'm starting to see that trend even here. And I had a conversation yesterday with an institution in Manchester where they were looking to introduce a keeper gown, and that keeper gown was going to be embroidered with university logo or college logo, the name of the student and their degree title and year, and that's actually on the sleeve of the gown. So that's a way of keeping the traditions that we have here, but also just adding that touch of personalization. And one of the things that I thought was very clever and quite visionary for them as well was that they want it to be something that they wanted to put it on the sleeve of the cuff of the gown, so it's picked up, excuse me, when they walk across the stage on the live stream. It's another way of reinforcing their college brand, you know. So that's definitely something that's happening here, and that, of course, is what we're talking about. That's physical product stuff. We're very much in the digital end of the spectrum, and you can do that with digital as well, as we've shown, by collecting these assets from these students, and then allowing them to co-create and be part of their experience.
Yeah, I think they not only enjoyed doing that during the virtual graduation era across the pandemic, but I think now they're coming to expect that to be part of the ceremony coming out, and so that we're hearing schools across the globe, all of our countries, who are hearing that and trying to implement that into their ceremonies. I think it all comes down to really focusing what's most important, and that is your graduates, and making sure that they get the recognition they deserve. Our last topic that we want to sort of group these into is really harnessing the power of alumni pride. And this is, I think, close to what I have spent my career on, is really how do you market to your alumni? How do you keep them engaged with what's happening at the institution? Previously, that was to capture destination survey data. So understanding where your graduates are going, how to reach them once they surrender their school email addresses and move into the workforce, to capture phone numbers, new cities of residence, wherever that may be. Previously, we would do that by maybe setting up a quick survey at the check-in line for graduation, or sending out a text message or an email after the ceremony. But it's always a challenge to get that, because as soon as they leave the campus, your chances of getting that data go down exponentially. And so one thing we've discovered through just our experience and through hearing from our partners is that really, if you can capture that data while the emotions are very high and the pride is very high of the institution at graduation, there's really not a better time to try and capture that information.
Yeah, and you can capture it again in a number of different ways. I've seen everything from setting up an alumni booth or table or stall and giving away a cup or a mug or a bag or something like that, and asking people to fill in things on paper forms. But one of the things, and this is something I really, will say, is and blow our own trumpet on, and it's something that's kind of surprised me actually as we went through our journey as a business, is just how incredible the completion rates are for surveys in this instance. A clip of a graduate walking across stage, that moment, that, I guess, for the selfie generation as well, is so powerful that they are prepared to do something to get it. And we found that our survey completion rates are typically in excess of 70%, and that for our clients has been a game changer, and why they've come back to us really over time. For many of those in alumni relations, yes, they like the idea of it being able to give a gift and that type of thing, but really they like the idea of being able to have insight into their audience more.
Yeah, and I think the the way that a lot of our schools in the U.S. have been putting it lately at conferences and in these conversations is that really it's all about having the right carrot to dangle in front of the students to encourage them to come and to do that. And so a clip or something like that has been very, very good and very successful for us.
In terms of how does the process work? It's pretty simple. You have an event on our system. Students are uploaded into that system. Emails are sent to those students to invite them to upload content. It also lets them know when their clips are ready and so on. And when their clips are ready, they'll then land on a survey page, and this actually just shows you from your side when those surveys are completed, what they look like, and can check the detail and so on. So it's a really simple thing. Our client success team would go through with you and help you put that survey together. And then when that survey is done, it will typically end up looking something like this. So very simple, very clean. And in this case, UWE Bristol is very keen to have them opt into Alumni News, and then they want to know about the ways in which the graduate may want to interact with the institution afterwards. Really simple. That's a 2-question survey, but it gives them so much insight. And just by knowing those 5 different segments there, they know how to talk to each individual in a relevant way going forward. This one's a bit more complex. This is Birmingham City University, where they're asking actually about the ceremony experience, one of the things we're talking about here today. So did you join a virtual celebration? What did you most enjoy? How would you rate the following? All those sorts of things. And that's quite a long survey. Still got very good results, even though it's pretty long. I'd say that's probably a bit too long. Now this one here had fantastic rates. This one was close to 83%. Very important to Staffordshire University to know what the personal email addresses of their alumni were. So that it meant that there was no .ac.uk or .edu addresses accepted. They took mobile phone numbers because when it came down to asking about employment and further study, if the graduate said they were interested in further study, then the careers team were reaching out to them and trying to encourage them to come back. And the further study button is actually quite an interesting one, is developing a bit more, because many institutions are now going into micro-credentialing. So whereas it may have been a 3 or 4 year undergrad degree, maybe then onto postgraduate and masters and so on, now there's lots of institutions that are creating micro-credentials to help their alumni through their work life journey, and it means they can talk to them relevantly about that. This one, University of West London, a similar thing. This is more careers orientated. What are you doing? And it gives them some insight on that. And I think finally, actually, one of the final bits where I've seen these kind of surveys used well is on graduate outcomes. So in the UK, there is a graduate outcome survey that's completed sometime out after graduation. They're using something like this now as a snapshot to say, right, where are we as an institution falling down, and how can we work hard to bring that back up, so when those outcome surveys are executed by our graduates, we're getting good results. So quite an interesting trend.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great introduction for our next tip here, which is really to focus on how your alumni want to be engaged with the campus. We hear so often from our schools, and we say schools here in the U.S., but our colleges and universities that we engage with, that really students are not wanting to hear about fundraising as the first sort of touch point from the school. So I've graduated, and then the first thing the school does or the college does is ask me for money. I don't want that. I don't want anything to do with that. That's a generational shift, but I think it's also just a personality shift. This idea that Gen Z, our graduating class, really wants to contribute. They want to give back. They want to serve. And that may look different for each individual student. So I think going to them, finding the causes and the opportunities to engage through the surveys that they identify with is key. Whether that's their time through volunteering or service projects with other alumni nearby, through mentorship as interns from the school coming back and giving talks or lectures on campus, or just traditional fundraising. So being able to the students who want to contribute financially can do that, whether that's through a scholarship fund that they're engaged with, or something along those lines. But I think it's all about making sure that you understand how to engage with your alumni, and to give them multiple channels to do that engagement.
Yeah, interesting. And on a very sort of practical level, again, if you're an institution that's running an alumni platform, Illuminati, Graduate, that type of thing, then we've had some very successful outcomes with gating clips on those platforms. So the driving factor for the institution has been the engagement on that platform and getting new alumni sign-ups on the platform. And so by gating the clips on the platform, they've been able to get really high levels of sign-ups. So that's something that you may want to consider as well.
So our last tip, number 10, is that really one of the best ways to build that immunity, that alumni pride, is to build affinity with a meaningful gift. So these gifts traditionally have been inexpensive, so something you can get a lot of for not a lot of budget, whether those are pens or cups or stickers or something along those lines. Typically, it's only something that attendees in person can receive, unless you have the additional budget to send out via mail to those who weren't able to attend. And often they end up put into a storage closet for the next ceremony, or ultimately recycled. And so I think the shift that we're seeing now is to move away from sort of those trinkets and knickknacks as gifts, to digital gifts for a couple reasons. One, they're eco-friendly, so there's not any sort of carbon footprint, and as much as you would have plastic cups or disposable pens. But they also give you insight, metrics, and performance data back to the institution. So you can actually see for every dollar that we've spent on these gifts to the alumni, whether that's a clip, Starbucks gift card, or something like that. You can actually measure the return, how much of that's being redeemed, how much engagement are we getting from graduate A versus graduate B when we're sending these things out. I think that's key to what you're doing.
Yeah, and we've got a whole host of institutions that always gave a gift to their grads, and typically it was a physical gift of some description. So you're right, they could only give those gifts in the main to those who were there. Maybe someone would mail some stuff out and so on. But once they were in the hands, they had no idea of what the performance was, what the impact is, what the ongoing metrics and ROI looks like for those gifts. And it's almost by accident within our business that we started getting this feedback. Hey, this is fantastic, because I can see exactly where my clips are being shared. I can see how much money I've spent and what my return is. I'm spending the same. A stage clip costs a cup of coffee. It's the same as, it's probably cheaper than a t-shirt and a mug. And so it really gives them that kind of insight. And then finally, of course, because these clips are so personal, they are shared in the peer networks of graduates. And that, then, we know personal recommendation is the best recommendation you can have. And so this type of thing then powers your student recruitment pipe for the future. It's showcasing what you can deliver as an institution. You just turned out, however many graduates, and someone else can see that. So it's great for your branding, it's great for your student recruitment pipe, and it's great for your being able to measure performance.
Graduation was always my favorite day of the year, because it really is that culmination of all of that work leading up to it. It's what every first year student has in mind whenever they start classes. And so really capturing that recognition and sharing life's big moments, I think, is what we're all about as a company.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it has always been about that moment. As I say, I have actually attended in person. We're totting it up over nearly 30 years, 10,000 ceremonies. It's a lot. And I never got bored of it, and I never got bored of the thrill of it, because of the moment. And so the StageClip product came out of a number of things. Number one, I love the moment. I love the whole event. But secondly, there was a point where it used to be that we filmed things and then gave people a DVD of the ceremony afterwards. And when we were working, we could do it so they could take it away. which was great. But really, all they wanted was those few seconds of fame, and they were prepared to pay quite a lot of money for it as well. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Really, it should be the institutions who benefit from this by all the branding and the marketing and so on, and that the graduates should benefit from being able to share it instantly. And that's really where the whole thing grew out. And then some of these trends that we're seeing evolving with personalization, individualization, survey features and so on has all come off the back of that fundamental nub that it's really, really compelling and very emotional.
So just to recap, the new standard for commencement really falls into 4 categories. And that's first, you've got to be able to return to in-person ceremonies and to return well, to take the knowledge that you've learned from everything that's happened over the last 18, 24, 36 months, and to be able to incorporate that to create a better experience for your graduates and their families. We've also got to engage every single graduate, not just those able to attend in person. So we have to think first and foremost about how do we do personal and individual recognition? How do we make sure that the families and the graduates who are watching online have content that's specific for them, that they're engaged just as much as the graduates and families who are in person at your event? And then finally, commencement has to be an opportunity for your alumni team to kickstart that engagement, to ride that wave of emotion that happens at its crest at graduation, and to identify how graduates want to engage with you for the rest of their lives, honestly, as they become your alumni. So that said, we would normally open up for questions and answers here. Rupert, how can they get in touch with us if they want to learn more?
Yeah, so very easy, obviously, the website, stageclip.com, or via email. I will be sending this recording out, so you should have a link in your inbox from me anyway. So it's rupert@stageclip.com in the first instance, and I'm happy to talk, or we are collectively. And if you wanted to talk to Keith at all, it's keith@stageclip.com. So thank you very much. And we look forward to hopefully working with you in the future.